Hey fellas. Well, I would be normally this time of year going to see Wonder Woman 84 and Soul in the theater, but it's for fairly obvious reasons that's not looking too good. Rest assured, I'll have my thoughts on both those movies after they stream tomorrow. I mean, and also about three-quarters of the way done on at the least at the most about 5/6 of the way done my WCC script. So in the meantime, this Christmas Eve, given how a lot of us are going to be here at home, or I thought I would do something different with my milestone and look at not just one on work, but a whole trilogy of them. Um, so for tonight's little trip in Disney Plus hole, oh, let's look at Home Alone trilogy for the 30th anniversary original film, which domestically was the highest grossing film in 1990, Indy, and the year which had many great films. So, which followed the adventures of a one Kevin McAllister, played by Macaulay Culkin, star-making role, when most of his family is going to Paris for Christmas. He's left home alone to fend for himself in their Chicago home. At the same time, where the Wet Bandits, it's it's that's Harry Lime and Mauve Albert, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, respectively. They they are coming to series of robberies. Thus, as his mother, played by Catherine O'Hara, tries to get back home after she realizes what's happened, and it falls to Kevin to keep the house safe, and hilarity ensues. So, the original film, and in my honest opinion, what makes makes it work is definitely three key elements. And I mean a sense of Yuletide warmth, a bunch of physical comedic gags, and definitely a simple, effective of the importance of family in this time I of need. But it's also quite well, I'd say, in this day and age. And everyone has their favorites, gags, and I think one of mine had to involve the film in the film, Answer Filthy Souls. Yes, it's not just a gag that he used for the Detective Pikachu movie, but also it's not an actual film, but rather an old gangster movie they made specifically for this film to the point where they even got the same kind of film stock and cameras that you would have used in that time period. You know what I mean? It works on multiple levels, and Kevin subsequently using as a means of pranking both the pizza guy and the burglars. Man, in a way, it's kind of easy to tell how that was made in 1990, and at the same time has kind of a feeling towards it that's made it become a tradition, and and for decades now. I mean, it's one of those rare films that's somehow both of its time and timeless. And so, let's keep it going. 2 years later, in 1992, year I was born, imagine that. A sequel came out with Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, which takes the simple premise of the first film and tweaks it in some very interesting creative ways, subtle ones as that. I think I was 9 or 10 when I first saw these movies for the first time, and I actually was surprised looking back. Like, I actually kind of liked how dark it was in points, like how with Haley and Mara apparently breaking out of prison and are after Kevin, and he got mixed up in New York when the rest of his family's on their way to visit their family in Miami. Me, and definitely has all the same kind of chemistry working there between all the characters, the gags, and the team of director Chris Columbus, No Relation Teams Explorer, and the late great John Hughes writing the script definitely had a lot to who who do with helping this film. Like it was another big hit, one of the most successful films in 1992. Who who making over 177 million dollars stateside alone, and definitely a lot of supporting players help with this as well. I mean, how even if they're ones that I didn't realize at the time, like Rob Schneider as a bellhop before he became one of Adam Sandler's proteges, and has some, shall we say, interesting in, in days online, and also, but Tim Curry as like the hotel manager is just delicious. As mean as not quite an antagonist as in the same level as Wet Bandits, but definitely my face lights up every time I see him on screen as well. I mean, it's a smashing inclusion. And as for the Donald cameoing, I will say that's kind of awkward now for a number of reasons. But on a more positive note, the talk boy that he had before it became like an official whole licensed gear, not just a prop, was basically a Halo kid in that time frame, and what someone like having like the new iPhone would be nowadays. I mean, is in terms of having one right in your pocket. I mean, it's kind of like how in the first two films, characters are introduced beforehand, and that's finding a sort of a kinship in Kevin. I want to help saving him in the end. Like in the first film, it was an old man. I believe his name is Harvey, and in the second, it's someone who's in Central Park feeding the birds. Insert Mary Poppins illusion here. Especially now that Disney owns the rights to these ones, and I'll come back to that, put a pin up for just one moment. Before I address what's probably my least favorite of the trilogy. Yeah. The third film, which came out in 1997, 5 years after the previous one, is where things definitely went off the rails. Home Alone 3, where by that point, both Columbus and Macaulay Culkin moved on, and I think in hindsight the studio should have two, but they continued on. With Hughes trying his best to write a script, but even he couldn't save this movie. I mean, in Chris's stead, there was future Scooby Doo, live action director Roger Gosnell, and while there were some cartoonish elements in the first couple of films, I think what made it work was like the chemistry of the cast and how they were as both comedic performers. And in Kevin's stead, we have Alex D. Linz playing Alex Pruitt, who is just at home with the chicken pox while his family is at work, which is not exactly on the same level of stakes as getting separated from your family on vacation. I mean, and since I was also before the vaccine became available, Wiley, I mean, and as for the quasi rear window stuff he was taking up with his pets and his gadgets, I don't think as someone who actually did have the chicken pox when it was a common disease, he's mean. I think I spent a lot more time on my Sega when I'm playing all Sonic 2 and Vector Man. Way better things to do with your hands and scratch, I'll say, hey, that much, man. And and at the same time, inside the Wet Bandits, we have, and no, I'm not making this up, a group of industrial thieves who are trying to steal a missile defense chip under the guidance of Hong Kong for North Korea. Any people who probably saw it in the theater back in the day probably had to make sure they didn't buy a ticket to Tomorrow Never Dies by mistake, which is a much better movie. But yeah, as you can tell, simplicity of the first two films setup has kind of been discarded, and the comedic attempts don't really work as well here. I mean, it plays hey, it's less like like tweaking in the whole comedic setups and more like a greatest hits collection and of the gags in the first two movies, like especially in the case of the traps. Like I mean, I mean, I mean, poop jokes, check. Shots to crotch, you better believe it. A kid who is definitely somehow able to outwit a bunch of thieves. He's, you're gonna believe it. It has less of the special feelings like the first film and some the second have a lot of people, and more like your average standard 90s family film, and it's really telling that after that, at the the only two films I made were GTV ones, which I'm not going to be covering right now. It was definitely the lowest grossing film in the franchise theatrically released installments, and it's me making a fraction back of what the previous two ones did. Opening weekend, it was basically splattered by Scream 2, and not long after that, there were both Titanic, which is a high school film of its time for over a decade, and Tomorrow Never Dies. And sure, it would basically be out of theaters as before its fifth weekend. And naturally, now that Disney owns the rights to the series as well as Fox, they plan to reboot the franchise Disney Plus, us with some of the cast returning, the past torture new generation. As to what I want out of it, for it to be good. I mean, I'm basically just gonna deal with all this as it comes, and also on top of potential offbeat dog comedy Ryan Reynolds, Nolan's being made. I'm open to the idea. I mean, as it were. I mean, weirder things have happened this year. I mean, but sometimes when a year it turns out the way this one has, it's not the worst year of experience, but it's definitely holds a bronze for the last five of my least favorite ones. And sometimes you just gotta make some lemonade, some dang lemons. That'll be all for now, and I wish you all Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And as for this year's parting words, I tell them, keep the change, you filthy animal.